The machines were already failing when Elizabeth Holmes stepped onto the stage and promised a medical revolution that would change humanity forever, and the one detail about what was happening behind those laboratory doors will completely change how you understand this story. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, because this lie spread across countries, hospitals, and boardrooms. And if you love scam stories where billion-dollar deception wears confidence like a costume, subscribe to ScamSphere, because this story only becomes more disturbing the deeper it goes. Elizabeth Holmes did not arrive in Silicon Valley as a criminal. She arrived as a symbol. She was young, articulate, relentlessly confident, and spoke with the certainty of someone who believed the future belonged to her. Dropping out of Stanford at 19, she framed herself as a visionary who rejected traditional paths to pursue something far more important. Silicon Valley did not see recklessness, it saw bravery. Investors did not see inexperience. They saw genius in its rawest form. Her company, Theranos, promised something the medical world had chased for decades. Hundreds of blood tests from a single drop of blood. No painful needles. Faster results. Lower costs. The promise was not just technological, it was emotional. Holmes claimed her invention would save lives, democratize healthcare, and remove fear from medicine. That framing disarmed skepticism before it could even form. The truth was brutally simple. The technology did not work. The machines failed repeatedly and fundamentally. They could not perform the tests accurately. They produced inconsistent results. They were unreliable by design. In real science, failure leads to revision. At Theranos, failure led to concealment. Holmes did not pivot when reality resisted her vision. She escalated. She cultivated an image carefully engineered to inspire trust. Black turtlenecks echoed Steve Jobs. A deliberately lowered voice projected authority. Her unblinking stare conveyed conviction. In Silicon Valley, confidence often substitutes for proof, and Holmes mastered that substitution perfectly. She built a board of directors filled with power rather than expertise. Former secretaries of state, military generals, political leaders. These men opened doors, silenced critics, and lent legitimacy without understanding the science. Their presence discouraged questioning. Their reputations acted as shields. Inside Theranos, secrecy became policy. Employees were isolated from one another. Teams were divided intentionally so no one could see the full picture. Conversations were monitored. Legal threats were constant. Whistleblowers were not debated. They were eliminated. Fear replaced transparency, and control replaced inquiry. When the machines failed, Theranos quietly relied on traditional blood testing equipment from other companies. Results were altered. Reports were manipulated. Patients were never told. Doctors trusted the data. Walgreens partnered with Theranos and rolled out testing centers nationwide. Trust cascaded downward until it reached the people with the most to lose. Media coverage amplified the myth. Holmes appeared on magazine covers as the youngest self-made female billionaire. She was praised as a pioneer. Journalists repeated claims without verification. The story was too inspiring to challenge. Doubt felt almost cruel. The most dangerous lie was not the technology. It was the certainty. Holmes never admitted uncertainty. She never acknowledged limits. She framed skepticism as resistance to progress. That framing turned caution into an enemy and silence into virtue. Behind the scenes, panic was constant. Engineers scrambled. Scientists failed. Deadlines passed. Investors demanded results. Holmes responded not with truth, but with pressure. Deliver something that looks real. Make it work long enough. Buy time. The withheld detail is this. Elizabeth Holmes knew the machines did not work, and she continued anyway. She knew patients were receiving false results. She knew the risk. She knew the harm. And she chose to proceed because belief had become more valuable than truth. The collapse of Theranos did not begin with flashing lights or a dramatic raid. It began the way most real scandals do, quietly, with discomfort. A handful of former employees, exhausted by fear and silence, realized that the lie they were protecting was no longer theoretical. It was harming real people. These were not rebels looking for attention. They were scientists, engineers, and technicians who had joined Theranos believing they were building the future of healthcare, only to discover they were maintaining a performance. Their internal alarms had been ringing for years, drowned out by lawyers, non-disclosure agreements, and the unspoken threat of financial ruin. Eventually, the sound became impossible to ignore. When investigative journalist John Carreyrou started asking questions, Theranos responded the only way it knew how. It threatened, it stonewalled, it denied. But journalism works differently than venture capital. Confidence does not replace evidence. Documents began to surface. Emails revealed internal panic. Lab reports showed altered results. Employees described being ordered to run tests on commercial machines while telling partners the results came from Theranos technology. This was no longer exaggeration or optimism. This was deliberate misrepresentation. Regulators from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services finally conducted inspections, and what they found was devastating. Labs were operating below basic standards. Quality controls were ignored. Records were incomplete or falsified. Theranos, the company that claimed to revolutionize diagnostics, was failing at the most fundamental level of medical testing. The illusion cracked publicly for the first time, and the reaction inside the company was not reform, it was damage control. Elizabeth Holmes remained defiant. She appeared on television, insisting everything was fine. She claimed critics misunderstood innovation. She framed the scrutiny as unfair pressure placed on a young company daring to challenge the status quo. Her confidence was unwavering, but it was no longer persuasive. The narrative that once inspired admiration now sounded rehearsed, mechanical, and hollow. As the walls closed in, partners began to flee. Walgreens shut down Theranos testing centers. Investors demanded answers they never received. Board members quietly resigned. The same powerful names that once amplified Holmes's credibility now distanced themselves, careful to avoid the stain of responsibility. The protection she once enjoyed evaporated almost overnight. Patients, meanwhile, were left to process the consequences. Some had been told they were gravely ill when they were not. Others were falsely reassured and delayed, seeking real medical care. These were not abstract risks. These were lives altered by fabricated data. Lawsuits followed, but no settlement could undo the damage inflicted by false certainty delivered under the guise of science. The federal investigation moved slowly but methodically. Prosecutors examined not just what Theranos claimed publicly, but what Elizabeth Holmes knew privately. The evidence painted a clear picture. She was repeatedly informed that the technology did not work. She was warned about inaccuracies. She was told the machines were unreliable, and she chose to continue anyway. The prosecution did not argue incompetence, it argued intent. Holmes's defense attempted to recast the story as failure, not fraud. They portrayed her as a founder, overwhelmed by rapid growth, misled by subordinates, and crushed by expectations. They emphasized her youth, her ambition, and her belief in eventual success. But belief does not excuse deception. The jury was asked a simple question: did she knowingly mislead investors and patients? The evidence answered for them. When the verdict arrived, it landed without drama. Guilty on multiple counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. Not guilty on others. A partial collapse, but a collapse nonetheless. The myth of Elizabeth Holmes ended not with a bang, but with a legal conclusion that stripped away the performance and left only the facts. Sentencing followed months later. Holmes stood in court no longer as Silicon Valley royalty, but as a convicted fraudster. The sentence was measured, calculated, and final. Prison time, financial penalties, restitution orders that acknowledged losses but could never truly compensate victims. The woman once celebrated as a billionaire innovator was now another cautionary tale in the long history of American fraud. Theranos itself disappeared completely. Offices closed, employees scattered, servers were wiped. The brand that once promised to reshape medicine became synonymous with deception. Business schools dissected the failure. Journalists chronicled the rise and fall. Streaming platforms turned it into entertainment. But beneath the analysis and dramatization remained an uncomfortable truth. This was not a story about one person alone. Elizabeth Holmes succeeded because the system rewarded her. Investors prioritized vision over verification. Media prioritized narrative over skepticism. Boards prioritized prestige over expertise. Everyone wanted the miracle, and no one wanted to be the person who questioned it. The scam thrived not because it was flawless, but because disbelief was inconvenient. Silicon Valley absorbed the lesson unevenly. Some called for more regulation. Others doubled down on founder worship. The language of disruption remained unchanged. The incentives remained intact. The Theranos scandal did not end startup fraud. It merely exposed how easily it can scale when confidence becomes currency. Holmes herself maintained a sense of detachment even after conviction. She continued to frame herself as misunderstood. She expressed regret without admitting wrongdoing. The performance softened but never fully stopped. That may be the most unsettling part of the story. Even at the end, the line between belief and deception remained blurred. The legacy of Theranos is not just about fake machines or false tests. It is about the danger of mistaking certainty for truth. It is about how ambition, when unmoored from accountability, becomes destructive. It is about how easily intelligent people can be convinced when confidence is presented as competence. Elizabeth Holmes did not invent fraud. She perfected its aesthetic for the modern age. Minimalist branding, inspirational language, mission-driven rhetoric. She wrapped deception in purpose and sold it as progress. That formula will return because it works. And if you think this scam was thrilling, wait until you hear about the next one. Because there are stories even darker, even larger, and even more unbelievable than this. And if you want to stay ahead of the lies that shape billions and destroy lives, subscribe to ScamSphere, where every illusion eventually collapses under the weight of the truth.